morning, everybody. Happy Pride. And we're delighted to be here with you today. And I have my wonderful panelists, Mícheál, Lorna, and Robyn. And I have spent this week celebrating Pride with my colleagues up in UCC. And I wanted to share a story about a little family that I saw yesterday visiting the Rainbow Walkway on the UCC campus. So our three little kids came in especially for Pride with their mum, and when they saw the Rainbow Walkway, their first instinct was to lie down on it and make rainbow angels. So I hope we can bring a little bit of that rainbow magic to the conversation today. So that's, I suppose, we're celebrating on the campus today, but Mícheál, can you tell me a little bit about how Apple is celebrating Pride this week?
Absolutely. So for us, obviously we celebrate Pride across the entire year, but this past week we've had some volunteering. So we have a large community in Cork and a large community that are based across the island of Ireland. So we invited everybody to participate in some virtual volunteering that we did. And then tomorrow we've got Ollie Pike, who is a children's writer and illustrator, who will be doing a talk for us. And of course, the highlight of the week is going to be on Sunday at the Pride Parade. So we're really looking forward to that.
You'll be there in force, I imagine.
We'll be there, about 250 of us.
Wow.
There's no way you're going to escape us.
Amazing, brilliant. What about you, Lorna?
So I suppose we're going to be snapping at Mícheál's ankles there to chase him up the road. We've had a lot of fun, obviously. It's all all roads are leading to the parade on Sunday. We're doing a cross-campus trip to Pride. So we're having like a breakfast together and then all heading off together. Some people are bringing their smallies and stuff to make it a bit of a family day out. We had loads of fun in June as well. We had Renee Van Meeding from Equality for Children in as a guest speaker, which is brilliant. So talking about, family challenges in not just the community, but like I suppose, people that are, looking into surrogacy in the country and the challenges they face. We also had an awful lot of fun on our Pride Day. So we had a lip sync battle that was drag themed. So yeah, it's just, I suppose, after COVID, bringing the fun back into it and celebrating, but also kind of highlighting some of the challenges that we face as well. So yeah, it was great.
Super. And Robyn, you work from home. Is it nice to see support online? And I know there's many people streaming this today.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. And I know Johnson & Johnson are in the Pride Parade on Sunday. So I'm not sure what the ins and outs of that, what they're going to be doing. But we had a Pride event in June as well. We raised the flag and we celebrated Pride, basically. So yeah, it's really nice to see everybody getting out and supporting.
Brilliant. And I know we're surrounded by wonderful flags today. And I have to admit, I did earn our flag. So Damien, you have good company. And I suppose the flags and the symbolism is very important. But talk to me a little bit about climate and culture. So climate is about perceptions, culture is about behaviour and what people do. And Lorna, can you tell me a little bit about what that culture is like in Stryker?
To be honest, I think, compared to previous companies I've worked for, it's just part of the fabric of who we are, that, it doesn't matter where someone's from, what their identity is, who they love. Everyone has a place. And I think particularly, we have our own D&I team, but we also have a cross-campus SAFE, so it's Stryker Allies for Equality. We have those groups that just, I suppose, it's nurturing the culture, but also kind of challenging, things people may not be aware of, starting the conversations. But I think, it's part of our mission and values that everyone has a place. It doesn't matter where you've come from. You are important. No matter what. And I think, the leadership teams are just fantastic with kind of nurturing those groups and investing in those groups, which is so important. All the ERGs that a company may have are important, but I think behind any company, whether they be successful or not, your people are your backbone. Without your people, you've nothing. And I think investing in those and understanding that their engagement will come from your investment in them as people, not just as employees. So that can be very powerful.
Yeah. And we all know the importance of strategic plans. We've heard about it from the previous panel, but ultimately if it's not informed by the people who it's for, it's not going to work. And I know in Apple you've done a lot around, making sure it's institutionalized and that it's core to who you are and your values. So can you tell me a little bit about that, Mícheál?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a really important word for us is belonging and creating that sense of belonging for people. So we've had diversity network associations, or ERGs as they're known by other names in other companies, for 35 plus years. So it's been a really important part of our fabric. internationally. And in Cork, we have 4 diversity network associations: Pride at Apple, Women at Apple, Black at Apple, and Accessibility at Apple. And for us, it's really important that we share a message that, you don't have to be to belong, and that we invite people in, right? And we celebrate the intersectionality. And then from a business perspective, it's a really important part of how we measure our success as leaders. Are you creating that inclusive culture for people to do their best work? Are you presented with a diverse slate of candidates when it comes to your hiring? So all of these things are really important for us, and it's I guess, a manifest way of illustrating a value that's really important for us.
Yeah, great. And what about Johnson & Johnson? Robyn, can you tell us a little bit about the culture there?
Yeah, the culture there, they have these credo values, and they're built into the whole aspect of the business. From every planning decision that they make, these values are included in it, and diversity and inclusion is one of those. They have metrics to measure how they're doing. They take it really, really seriously. The ERG that we have for Open and Out, we have senior leadership on the panel of that group, and I think that kind of empowers the whole company to say that, look, this is taken really seriously. Inclusivity and diversity is something that is at the very core of our beliefs. And they do great work on that. And there is a culture of diversity and inclusion across the campus and across the business, regardless of ability, gender, sexual orientation, anything like that. So it does reap the rewards of it, I think.
Fantastic. And obviously there's some controversy around Pride and big companies sponsoring it. And can you tell me a little bit from an organizational perspective, how your companies have dealt with things like pinkwashing and how, we can do better and go beyond just the week of Pride? And Mícheál, I might start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can turn your attention to the front cover of the magazine, you'll see a little teeny tiny Apple logo there. And that's the only place that you'll see the Apple Pride logo in any capacity for Cork Pride, because we turn our attention inward. Our participation at the Pride Parade is for our employees. It isn't about, plastering the logo everywhere to try and, articulate a value system. It's more than that for us. It's really all about our people. The pinkwashing thing is easy to understand when you've got grassroots community organizations who feel corporate entities are taking over, and that's never our intention when we show up at these types of events, right? We just want to support and to provide some degree of, I suppose, endorsement for the activities that people are doing in this space. I think.
Okay, no worries. Everyone's okay.
Everyone's okay. I thought it was a round of applause for a while. We definitely, I think, you look at the Pride Apple Watch wristband that we produced. That was produced as a direct response to customer demand. Our customers were asking for that. We had produced them for our employees as a kind of a token for them to participate in our Pride parades with. And then demand from customers was, please produce this for us. But the proceeds from those go to ILGA in Europe, and then to charities like GLSEN in the United States. So for us, it's really important that that's then fed back. And we have a strategic partnership with Product Red as well to help fight AIDS in Africa. And that's a really important part of what we do in the company as well, too.
Yeah. And you all come from global organizations. So I suppose, how does that element work in terms of being in Ireland and, having an international perspective? Lorna, can you tell me a little bit about that?
I think it can benefit you greatly because, the more perspective and I suppose more diverse the population is, the better for it doesn't matter what you're talking about. Like I mentioned, our SAFE group, that's a global network across Stryker. So, we kind of share ideas and we learn from those people as well. And I think, you can kind of, you see in some countries, and it's something we've spoken about quite recently within our own group, that, you see some countries where they don't have the freedom to have events such as this, or, it's the culture in that particular country or the political climate. I think that you can kind of, expand your allyship that way as well, and kind of, understand that, we've got quite a lot of privilege that others don't. And I suppose, you can support from afar, but also you can challenge, the challenges that other people have, and use a global network. A global company does have quite a lot of impact. So I think, if it's just one company doing it, but when many companies do, I think it has much more of an impact.
Impact and, I suppose, responsibility as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And that responsibility is something that the last panel reflected on in terms of what future graduates might look for when they come to be employed in one of those organizations. And Robyn, I know that you're one of those people, so can you tell us what do you look for when you're looking for a job?
Yeah, so I'm a mature student. I'm just about to go into my final year of Business Information Systems at MTU. And I suppose for myself and my peers and my classmates, we're just coming out of internships and we're going into looking at graduate roles. And companies are really marketing to us quite aggressively for us to choose them for our roles. And I suppose the people I'm in college with, they're all 21, 22, so they would have been about 14 or 15 when the Marriage Equality Act passed. So they've grown up in a very different Ireland to what me as a millennial would have done even. So they go into companies and they just expect a base level of an EDI. They're not going to accept any company that doesn't have a really strong and concrete level of diversity and inclusion policy. And for myself, looking at companies, like for me, it's something I feel very strongly about. It's something that I would absolutely be one of my first questions that I'd ask a company. What is your policy on this? You know, how is the culture in the company? So yeah, I think it's something that you know, this year or this level of graduates are going to be looking for going forward.
And I suppose differentiating between what's real EDI and what's tick box EDI is going to be really important. So Lorna, how might Stryker differentiate themselves?
I think, to be honest, from a personal level, I suppose it's the first, you know, employer I've gone into openly gay, and that for me is something that, you know, I wouldn't have. I don't know what it was. It was just a feeling that I just could. You know, I've worked in different backgrounds, and you know, it would be that tick box, but you don't feel it. I think it's hard to, I suppose, explain, but when you just have this sense of comfort that you can just be yourself. Like, I suppose a lot of people would identify with having hidden for a long time, or, you know, different people may, you know, the period of time may be shorter for different people or longer for different people. But when you've hidden, you don't want to have to do that every day. You know, it's so nice to go in and just say, you know, are you seeing someone? Rather than, you know, if you're getting to know people, having, you know, visible employee resource groups that anyone can join, that it's not, you know, top level, or it's not just the people in the community, that, you know, you have strong allies and you promote allyship and have it as part of your, you know, your goals and objectives, to have the allyship training, have the education, remaining current with your education as well, and, you know, knowing what's going on, what challenges may rise for the community. There's so much, but I think just being able to feel that you can be yourself is mentally empowering, and obviously then the more yourself and open and comfortable you can feel in the workplace, the engagement then will just go through the roof, and everyone will benefit then. And it's just, it just flows then naturally, I suppose.
I'm really glad you found somewhere where you can be yourself. It's really important. And you talked a little bit about maybe where you can't be yourself. And Mícheál, can you talk to us a little bit about the concept of covering at work and what that might look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not familiar with it, a former vice president of Apple, actually, incidentally, Christy Smith, had done a lot of research into this area called covering. And it's the idea that you need to downplay or diminish aspects of your identity in order to thrive in the workplace. And that can be, you know, being in the closet if you're LGBTQ. It could be if you're a woman of color, perhaps straightening your hair so that your hairstyle is perceived as more professional, or whatever the case may be. And the, I guess, psychic energy, for want of another word, that you spend on that, the time, the energy that you spend on covering your identity, you know, it's a cost to you as an individual, right? Whereas if you do have an opportunity to live with authenticity in the workplace, you can channel that energy into much more productive things, right? You can absolutely improve the way that you engage with other people. I had a conversation with Damien last week, and he was talking a bit about how, you know, sometimes, you know, when you're not out at work, you dread the conversation about what are you going to do at the weekend, right? Or what did you do at the weekend? And, you know, people feel the need to then cover that element of their personality. But to be out of the closet and to not have to do that, I think is really empowering for people. Now, that said, of course, we're mindful that everybody's journey is their own. For many people, they may never feel comfortable coming out at work. They may separate the two and compartmentalize them, but the research itself is particularly enlightening. It covers quite a broad spectrum of different identities, so I would absolutely encourage people to have a look at it and to read through it.
Brilliant, thank you. And I suppose in terms of those intersecting identities, you've all mentioned, staff networks and different groups, and we know that intersectionality is a critical force in terms of addressing EDI effectively. So can you tell me how the different staff networks in your organizations maybe come together and reinforce, say, the celebration of something like Pride? And Robyn, could I ask you maybe a little bit about your experience in Johnson & Johnson to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, they come together across all sorts of different different ways. They do things like, for example, recently I was working on a project that would attract more neurodiverse talent to the company. So, I mean, they're looking at diversity across many pillars, not just, the one, or not just, women in STEM, which would be kind of a big one for them, being such a manufacturing facility, that it's not just that they do across all sorts of diversity and inclusion aspects.
And Mícheál, I know you mentioned some of the groups within Apple, and I know my colleague, Dr. Amanda Sonde, is going to be talking about racism shortly and how we deal with that in Irish society and how that intersects with LGBT identity as well. But can you tell me a little bit about, how those different groups in Apple work together?
Yeah, absolutely. At a very simple level, you could see it when we invite guest speakers on the campus. People like Karen Underwood, for example, we very much celebrate intersectionality through someone like Karen, who is Black, a woman, gay, and it's an opportunity for her to share her story around her intersectionality. Storytelling we find particularly effective, and being able to give people insight into the challenges that you face. The challenges I face as a white gay man are going to be very different to the challenges that a Black gay man might face, or a white woman may face. So we've got to try and get insight into other people's perspectives. The storytelling medium is really effective for that. So when we sit down and think about our programming for the course of the year, we try and think about, okay, what's the best possible way for us to articulate our story across all of these different diversity network associations in a way that really celebrates, belonging and giving people an opportunity to be their best selves in the workplace. So that for us is key.
Great. And Lorna, can you tell me, how can organizations, what's the next step? How can they reinforce that sense of belonging?
I think I've mentioned, kind of ingrain it into the absolute, fibre of your culture. In induction, people are given their security badges. They have a Pride lanyard. That's now our official lanyard on site, which is amazing. And that was just, the site leader saying, no, that's happening. I think just bringing it to everyday kind of, meetings and things like that, there's always a plan to progress. I think the education side of it is really important. We actually use a link training program. There's so many resources available just in Cork alone, but that's fantastic in terms of awareness and allyship training. We also kind of collaborate with our other ERGs, so SWIN is Stryker Women's Network, so we look at what they've got coming up ahead, and I think using all of your different employee resource groups, they'll do the work, invest in them, and they'll bring it to the next level, and they'll tell the leadership team what's needed, because they'll hear it from, I suppose, the ground up. We have product builders part of our team, we have members of the leadership team, so everyone is represented, and you've got your allies, you've got your members of the community, and I think just having it as part of an everyday conversation. I think sometimes not being afraid to have a more difficult conversation. If someone is kind of afraid to ask something, no one learns. Whereas sometimes if someone means well and isn't sure about maybe terminology or what way someone might identify, keeping it simple, put your pronouns at the bottom of your email, because that just becomes the norm for everyone else to do it. And I think little things like that, sometimes the grander gestures aren't as meaningful, whereas it's the everyday thing. Someone starting new at the company gets their Pride lanyard and they know straight away, day one, they have a place there, they're safe there. So just ingrain it across every fibre of the culture, and it's not just, I suppose, LGBTI awareness. It's visible, invisible disabilities. D&I is so broad. It touches everyone, every facet of everyone's life. So keep the conversations going at every level of the business.
Yeah. And I think you make a really important point there. It's the quiet work that nobody sees. That's EDI. So you might think it's just putting a pronoun on a signature, but you have to talk to the people in IT, they have to approve, that has to go on, they have to code it in. There's a whole piece of work behind a simple gesture or a seemingly simple gesture. And sometimes the amount of time that that takes, people may not appreciate it. So I think building up those together, that's what creates the culture and that's what makes people own things, because then the IT technician that worked on that is invested. That was his project. He did it. He'll help promote it. And I suppose from the perspective of Johnson & Johnson, Robyn, can you tell me a little bit about maybe the silent heroes within the organization, or the people who are doing that kind of work who you may not even think are EDI champions, but they really are?
Yeah, I think it's so ingrained across the whole company. I mean, if you look at the senior managers, like everything they do, and, you know, working on business plan for 2023, we're looking at ways, you know, of concrete metrics that we can measure how well the company is doing. And I think seeing the senior leaderships with that kind of investment in it, and it's just an everyday culture of, you know, this is how we are, this is the way that, you know, the environment that we promote. And those small little things of keeping the conversation open, and those small little things that make a difference to people, you know, that they're just kind of throughout the company really, and you do see them every day, and yeah, it's good to see.
Thanks, Robyn. So, final question for you, Mícheál. What next for EDI in the workplace?
You know what, I think I reflect back on Mícheál Martin's speech earlier, and that the importing of that toxic debate around trans rights and things like that, that's I think where the next step is, because, you know, if like me you're as old as dirt and remember the 1980s, you'll remember, you know, some of the rhetoric that was being used about the gay community back then is the rhetoric that's being used today about the trans community, and you can see it's just repackaged, and I think that's the next big battle, right? I'd like to think that, you know, we won't see it kind of infect our culture the way that you've seen it in perhaps the US or in the UK. But, you know, 3 days of controversy because Lifeline was platforming what I would consider hate speech, like, that is the next battleground as far as I see it. And, you know, I think there is no LGBTQ community without the T, right? So for us, that's the next most important thing, is making sure that we show up for Transgender Day of Visibility, you know, that we are there to support our trans and our gender non-conforming siblings, right? That's, for me, I think, the next big thing.
Yeah. Thanks, Mícheál. And I suppose that's an important takeaway from today, that there's still work to do, and it's work with pride, but it's ongoing work with pride, and we can't forget that. So as much as the commitment by each of your organisations is to be applauded, I'm really glad that there's champions within those organisations to keep doing the good work. So thank you so much to the three of you for your time today. And thank you to Vanessa and Suzanne, our ISL interpreters, and thank you also to IBEC for sponsoring this event, and thank you to all for listening.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
It's